Sky News. The full story first.
Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Thursday, May the 21st. The House will break up today for the Whitsun recess and not resume until the 1st of June, but there is a lot to pack in. The former Prince Andrew back to the forefront of attention. We're set to get a document dump today. My nocturnal colleague, Andrew MacDonald at Playbook, confirming last night about a dozen files relating to the disgraced former prince will be released at some point likely this morning, and they should shed some light on the discussions in the Blair government over his appointment as trade envoy. And of course, the role of Peter Mandelson.
Oh, God, not another lot of Mandelson documents. What else is there?
Rachel Reeves is doing another intervention on the cost of living. The government is set to finally publish guidance following the Supreme Court ruling on the meaning of sex in the Equality Act, and MPs finding out whether assisted dying legislation is about to be revived. Yes, it is a bumper day. I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. You pack in so much on these last days before a little break. It's effectively half-term break. We'll be back after the bank holiday next week for an edition on Tuesday, but just Tuesday. But you can see why there's a little pause, because I think things are going to accelerate again once MPs get back. There is a growing consensus, Anne, I think, about what's about to happen amongst ministers, MPs, civil servants. I've been talking to loads of people in the last few days. And I know that Westminster consensus is a dangerous thing, but the presumption, the sort of central scenario for what happens is pretty settled. And that is that if Andy Burnham wins the by-election in Makerfield, then things could move quite fast for him. And the ultimate consequence is we could now have a change of Prime Minister before the summer. It doesn't feel to me, whatever they say in public, that Keir Starmer would put up much of a fight. He might give a timetable, but we'll hear more from him after the June 18th by-election date. And it's not clear to me anyone will stand in Andy Burnham's way. We see from the front page of the Times, Wes Streeting wouldn't stand in a contest. Interestingly, I think his team would deny this at the moment, and he'll go to his political grave insisting he has the numbers. But after last week, does anyone believe him? But all of that could well mean that we actually get on with the job of changing Prime Minister pre-summer, because so much is stuck until we do that.
We've got more Burnham studies in the podcast later on how his team are seeing all of that and their preparations. But one figure who seems to have just decided to enjoy the job while it lasts is Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. A reception in number 11 for 60 MPs last night. More announcements today. She's been writing op-eds. She's now on TikTok, a smiley mini video about helping the country with the cost of living and travelling around. So here is the Chancellor amid all of those ad memes.
Hi TikTok, I want you to be the first to know that this summer for kids aged between 5 and 15, there's going to be free bus travel in England. And this is just one of the things that we are doing to help people with the cost of living in these uncertain times.
I have to say, Anne, as the rest of Whitehall feels to me to be, frankly, pretty listless, I love the energy she's suddenly got for all of those 300 followers on TikTok that have signed up to her account. Some way to go before she gets the 75 million of Billie Eilish. But, it's important to aim high. An appearance on Screen Rock beckoned. I'm sure Jacob and Jake will be kind. If you know, you know. So welcome to a new phenomenon.
And if, like me, you don't know at all what Sam Gates has just been talking about, you then move on to talk about speculation, because I'm from the old world. And I'm going to talk instead about speculation on a Burnham premiership and who the job of Chancellor would go to. And there's a lot of noise around Ed Miliband getting that role, if indeed Manchester Man makes it back to the south. The FT reporting that Ed Miliband has played a key role advising Andy Burnham to commit to fiscal discipline in the last few days as Burnham sorts out which bits of the existing Starmer-Reeves agenda he's going to adopt and which bits he'd be expected to dump.
Yeah, there's a lot of money going on Edmund Bander's, Andy Burnham's Chancellor. I wouldn't dismiss alternative candidates. Just look out for Shaban Mahmood going to the Treasury. She's a fiscal hawk who could reassure the markets. And another person who looks like they're making a bid, a press release has dropped in my inbox this morning from Wes. Yes, I've really got the numbers. Streeting, pledging to introduce a wealth tax that works. Now, it's a detailed, complicated plan about various bits of capital gains. But I think that would simply be seen as, not as his press release said, a bid for the leadership, but his bid for the Chancellor's chair.
Yeah, interesting, because as you say, it revives that. What can you do with CGT, but to get some more squeeze tax out of it? But really, it is being presented as a wealth tax. So he seems to be really positioning himself a bit more towards that kind of left view of wealth on that one. Elsewhere, self-inflicted wounds from the government. The big topic, I'm actually at a big security conference in Prague, Sam, and the big topic here and elsewhere across Europe and certainly into Ukraine is the easing of sanctions on Russian oil processed in third countries amid concern about supplies of jet fuel and the cost of living. So emergency measures on that, yes, but absolutely rowing back against the passionate embrace of sanctions, for which Keir Starmer got personal plaudits from Volodymyr Zelensky only recently. So the Department of Business and Trade blindsided the rest of Whitehall by slipping out a statement on Tuesday, stating that it would allow these imports of relevant processed oil products from Wednesday. And both on the facts of that and on the way it emerged, a massive political row.
This blew my mind for two reasons. I mean, first of all, ministers have spent months telling us there's not a problem with jet fuel, right? And there they are taking emergency measures because of potential supply problems with jet fuel. But more importantly, if Keir Starmer's reputation legacy stands for one thing and one thing only, it's his role on the foreign stage, particularly standing up to Russia. So this does incredible damage. All sorts of knock-on effects for this sort of DBT, Department of Business and Trade, authored kind of move. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, literally on her way to a foreign ministers' conference as this all broke, to tell other foreign ministers they needed to do more on sanctions on Russia, right? How embarrassing is that, right? The backlash was immediate and intense. We saw Ukrainian ministers weigh in, but I understand that other countries were on the phone within hours going, what on earth are you doing? Particularly those who are more on the front line against Russia, just, immediately picking up their phone to Britain going, hang on, this is a complete mixed signals contradiction. But I've learned something else, Anne. President Zelensky is actually going around European Union capitals this week, and there were hopes that he might check in and come to the UK on Friday. Now, there's not a fully fledged announced plan. We would have noticed that, but there were hopes in Whitehall that we'd get a visit. Well, yesterday morning, around the time that Ukrainian ministers were weighing in on social media, word came that the visit was now much more unlikely. Now, I can't call the visit as being cancelled for good, and there was no firm plan in the first place. And there's a chance that it was all patched up in the late night call between Starmer and Zelensky last night. So we'll see. But that's the scale of the damage that Peter Carl's department has inflicted on the rest of Whitehall.
It's an odd saga, this one, isn't it? I mean, it's because it is true. It is Carl's department, but it would appear that Starmer has also shifted his stance. I mean, he must have known about this. So if we're allowing imports of jet fuel and diesel made from Russian oil refined in other countries, but that's just the way these things work, and then having it come out the way it did, it just looks like very unjoined up government, unless there was just nobody really wanted to be the one to announce it. I mean, that's my slightly cynical view of this. Now that Prime Minister is having to say and make clear at PMQs yesterday, he's not lifting sanctions on Russian oil in any way whatsoever. Well, it appears at the same time that we just did. I suppose the only way out of it is just to say this is very temporary. But if you notice, there's no timeline put on this. So the whole thing has just turned into a very confusing story. And as you point out, Sam, I mean, I'm around here with some officials from the G7 countries who had also been at this meeting in Paris of finance ministers on Monday, and the topic didn't appear to have been raised there, and that has very much flummoxed the major allies. Now, since then, we've had that apology via Chris Bryan, a trade minister, but I suppose speaking on behalf of his department, really overall, saying the way that this has emerged was clumsy, and that it will be revoked or suspended as soon as possible. But then what does that mean? I mean, either you're short of jet fuel enough to do this or you're not. And clumsy is really about the communications and the manner of it. Whereas, I think, circling back to what you're saying, for Volodymyr Zelensky, for Ukraine, and also very close allies, they just think it's the wrong thing to do in the first place. It's not the way you did it that's wrong.
That's absolutely fascinating. By the way, can we just pause for a moment on the subject of the UK annoying the hell out of our European partners at the moment, right? You're sitting in Prague, but if you're sitting in Berlin or Paris or Dublin or Warsaw, you're watching an incredible series of mixed signals coming out of the UK on a number of things, but particularly our relationship with the EU. You know, you've got rejoin, not rejoin, single market, not single market, customs union, blah, 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 blah. And then promises from Tories and Reform to unpick anything that's agreed now. All of this is coming to a head, Anne, because Keir Starmer, remember him, demanded a big EU summit this side of the summer. And, you know, we're running out of time, right? And I understand that they're probably going to announce the date next week. One date penciled in is around like July the 13th or so. That's a Monday. It might be a few days either side of that, but sometime around then. Look, expectations in Whitehall are already incredibly low for this summit. They're not sure that there's a lot to announce. Perhaps just redoing the announcement on, you know, getting rid of food and drink and agriculture borders known as phytosanitary standards, SPS. But even there, if you're sitting in a European capital wondering just how much to give the UK at the moment, all that uncertainty is just going to mean the answer is not very much. And if you don't even know who the Prime Minister is, you're not really sure what their policy position is, then you're just less likely to play ball. So, you know, maybe, you know, this summit is the moment that Andy Burnham introduces himself to you know, Ursula von der Leyen and potentially some other European leaders if more turn up, although it tends to be just the European Commission chief that leads it. But in substance terms, you know, I think all of this argument gets pushed back in terms of the UK's relationship with the EU.
I'm now trying to imagine Ursula von der Leyen going, not another one. But I think it is looking a bit like, you know, the youth mobility scheme is going to have to be the pièce de résistance. It's going to really have to work. Poor Nick Thomas-Symonds has been crafting away at this summit for most of his adult life. But as you're suggesting, I think that's the logic of where we are, that a prime minister without authority struggles to lead the system. The system then becomes very diffuse, or the idea of rejoin, you know, a lot of big senior EU figure saying to me this week, you're not really going to rejoin, like, if ever are you? And, you know, so at the same time, you've raised all of these things while, you know, we have some very serious stuff to be dealing with, not least Ukraine and, of course, Strait of Hormuz. But it does now also flick attention, doesn't it, to Andy Burnham and what would he actually do if he were, as you suggested at the top of the podcast, it could end up in number 10 very fast indeed. So Dan Bloom at Politico has a piece up today on the behind-the-scenes peddling on all of that, from what almost feels like a Burnham administration in waiting. It would be very disappointing if he doesn't make it in the by-election for them. And pointing out that they're trying to do three things at once. Got to, you know, win the by-election, get any leadership election done and dusted. It could fall away, but you never know. And a transition to government. And a source there saying it's got to be done and knitted together in a way that works for all of these audiences, for Makerfield, the Labour Party, and the country. And of course, there is an option that he could be prime minister within days, as happened when Rishi Sunak got the crown in 2022. Just one thing on your really good point about the rest of the world and Europe, particularly not knowing what we stand for. Someone who spoke with Dan saying that Burnham would not be likely to be doing a lot of foreign policy in the way that Keir Starmer clearly owned it, and the Keir Miles, saying that they thought this was someone close to Andy Burnham, that he'd be the opposite. He would do not much foreign travel, as little as humanly possible, and the foreign secretary, therefore, would be a really big appointment, which is interesting, and also the suggestion that it could be a different foreign secretary. Who knows?
That is very interesting. Andy Burnham is going to have to move at pace. There's no doubt about that. There's a couple of issues that are going to be quite high on the news agenda later today, which I think are great tests of where he comes out on stuff. They're two issues that are culture war issues, and they're issues where there's no way of avoiding a row over what he thinks because people are just very divided. One is how you deal with single-sex spaces in the light of the trans rights row, because we've got the Equality and Human Rights guidance being published by government following the Supreme Court verdict on single-sex spaces last year. We've been waiting a long time for that. And the other is there's the private members bill ballot over in the Commons, and the pressure on whoever comes out quite high in that to pick up Kim Leadbeater's assisted dying bill. And on both, there are basically quite a lot of calls for Burnham to clarify his views. The Times goes in quite hard on Burnham, pointing out that he once said that the notion of single-sex spaces was a minority view and called for transgender women to be able to use female toilets. Now, I am told that Andy Burnham will clarify his view on all of this area to do with the guidance from 10 o'clock this morning on his BBC Manchester phone-in. So that is very much on his agenda. So, we'll see where he lands on that. But we don't have a position on assisted dying. I really struggle to think that MPs are going to want to go through all of that again at a point where the whole of the rest of the political system is broken. The idea that an MP is going to put their hand up and go, I want to be the face of one of the most contentious issues at a point where our political system can't do the basics feels unlikely to me, but there's a lot of lobbying on both sides.
Be interesting when Burnham gets back into that hot seat. He dropped out last week, didn't he, when he was figuring out what to do and how to do it. I think also you can feel the mood around this and the way that Labour has struggled with the single-sex spaces question, Sam, that I think the days are gone when you can just keep fudging it and keep trying to sort of, I'm going to take both positions at once and just tell everyone to be kind. I think people want some clarity on where people stand. It's obviously, it's a hugely contentious and very difficult subject, and I think particularly for a lot of people on the left of centre. But it'd be quite interesting to see, like, when Andy Burnham has to talk about something he really doesn't want to talk about, how will his communication style come off? Because this week he's actually, been able to hold the conch on his own terms, hasn't he? So I'm really intrigued as to how that goes.
One of the biggest political things he did this week was a total U-turn on his fiscal position from a Bloomberg interview 6 months ago where he was suggesting fiscal rules might have to change. You saw a pamphlet by the soft left group of MPs suggesting over time fiscal rules need to be looked at. But he absolutely committed, his team absolutely committed to the fiscal rules staying as they are. That's one of the biggest things in politics, and he's totally changed his view, but with very little political heat in that moment. It won't be as easy to do things like that in future. That's pretty much it for us for this week. Bank holiday Monday. So as I said earlier, we'll be back on Tuesday for one episode. It's half-term week. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a lovely time in Prague.
We'll do. Among all the defence nerds. Tuesday, we thought we should come back for one, didn't we, next week? Because stuff just does keep happening.